So no matter what you choose to draw, you're going to start with a shape, the bigger shapes working to the smaller details. And I want you to remember to draw light till you know it's right. I'm obviously going to draw really small because I'm just doing a quick demo, but you guys need to think about how you are filling the space of your paper. So to start off with, I'm going to look at this drake mallard right here. So if you were doing a duck, look at the angle of the bill, like where it goes into the head. And I'm starting off really lightly, like I know that's not quite right and I'm going to adjust it. Look at the angle where it connects and then it goes up. Yesterday with 4th grade, I had a lot of them who were doing it like this. But it actually like changes angle. So where the bill connects to the head, it kind of goes up and then back around. You can also kind of look, if this isn't a very clear picture because it's kind of old and it's zoomed out. But typically, like where the bill connects, you can follow the curve around and it's sort of like a cheek. I don't know what the actual like term would be for a duck, but it kind of like curves around. So you can mark when you're sketching like where you see shadows and where you see curves, and that'll kind of help you out, okay? And then this comes back that way and curves down. Notice that the neck comes down and you see the back wing above it, okay? A lot of times people will try to start it just right here, but it actually is back further, okay? So pay attention to where things actually match up. And then in the front, when you have a duck or a goose that's in the water, you're gonna see an S or a backwards S. And that's just to remind you that they're curvy, okay? Birds have curves. So I know, I gotta make up rhymes to get little kids to remember. It works for big kids too though. So it just reminds you that like there's gonna be a curve here. This one's got a little bit of an angle, but it does curve back out. And then the chest matches up like a little bit past where it connects. So you can compare to other parts of your drawing to see where things should go, okay? So there's my backwards S, sort of, it's kind of like a 7, but curvy. And then in the water, it's gonna curve around a bit, okay? So I can also see where other things match up. So like right around in here, that's a little bit too skinny. On a drake mallard, you see that white ring, kind of like curves. You wanna mark that. And then at that point, that's sort of where the chest, like this is actually a dark brown, even though it looks black in my photo. This comes down, so like that's where the wing is starting, but the chest changes color. So you kind of like sketch in like your big color changes, okay? And then I can follow this. This is the line between the two wings, like where they meet at the back. So I can sketch that out. You know, I'll try to come back and like refine this a little bit later. I'm just gonna sort of fill in to help me see if I'm close. Get my back wing here. Okay, and then on the back end, on the drake, see these curls? They have like pintails that curl, okay? So the tail kind of comes back like this. I'm looking at where the colors change. The white kind of comes around, and then there's black here. And then I've got these like curly feathers. So I would start off with kind of a loose sketch to help me get the big areas. Then before I would start like actually adding color or shading, I would go back and make sure I have everything exactly where I want it. Like this is probably a little bit too short. It should be longer. So I can measure. I could be like, all right, the wing is more than half of the body. But I can find things like, okay, is the height from like the belly where it hits the water to the back, that's about half of the wing. So I can go like 1, 1, 2, and that would tell me like how long it should be. So you can find things to compare it to. I was taught to use my pencil to like measure and kind of lock that in to compare things. Then I would go back, you know, refine things more, like put in the little details, like notice where that goes there. Like the eyes kind of in there, I would mark like where the shadows go to kind of help me. It has like little texture here. Like I said, this photo is really zoomed out, so it's hard to see. But it's actually kind of like these zigzaggy lines that are real close together. So I would mark all the color changes and all of that. In the water, most of the time, if your bird is in the water, you're gonna see a reflection. Reflections are fun. They are your friend. Don't let it scare you. It's kind of the same shape, but upside down and wavy. So I see here, it's sort of just like I'm holding my pencil back farther in my hand so I can make like a loose kind of sketchy line. Felix, you should be paying attention up here right now. Close your computer while I'm teaching, please. I see that kind of matches up there. But like I said, sort of the same thing, just upside down and wavy. You could also do, like, I kind of see some water lines, like, going through it like ripples where it's swimming. So you can kind of mark that. Okay, so you start with loose shapes, fill into bigger details. If I was doing the hen, you know, I would get the big shape. Obviously, I would be taking my time a lot more. It's hard to talk and draw at the same time. Since she's like sitting down, it must have been cold that day. There's not a very big gap between like the bill and the chest, like the neck's kind of hunched down in her wings. But still look where the curves go. So if you have a hen or a duck with a lot of pattern, when it's time to actually add color, you will do that in layers. So I would do like kind of this tannish color in the background and then come back and do the dark parts on top. But I still do like to sketch out, you know, the big shape. So if you can see the individual feathers, like you can on a lot of birds, not so much on a mallard's wing, but on a lot of them, then you would mark off like, okay, here's the big wing here. See this little patch of color? That's called a speculum. A lot of ducks will have like a bright color. A lot of times it's blue, but not always. Like green wing teal, they have green speculum. So I would want to mark like everywhere there's those color changes. And then I want to look at where the feathers actually overlap. So I kind of have like this big shape, and then I could come back and, you know, draw like where I see the feathers. And like, oh, it's dark in here, dark. So you want to draw the lines and shapes that you actually see. If it's a goose, much longer necks. Actually, this might have been the one I looked at for the drawing where I did pictures of every step. Just remember, geese have much longer necks than ducks. So remember to compare and look at your picture. And before you guys get to where you're going to add color or shading, I'll have you bring your drawing and your photo and we'll look at them together, because it's good to have another set of eyes. Sometimes you look at your drawing so much that you get like too close to it and you can't notice things that maybe you should, that are a little bit off or that you should adjust. Like I have a drawing, it's actually at More Than Lemons, it's a self-portrait, and I was like so excited and I just like in the zone and I whip it out and then I stand it up at the end and I'm like, oh no, the proportion's off. So it's only correct if it's laying flat. If I had someone else look at it with me before I like finished it, I probably could have adjusted it, but I just got in a hurry and like did it all the way through. So now, you know, if I'm the only one around, like I'll send a picture. I have a bunch of friends who are art teachers. I'll send it to them and be like, does this look okay to you? Is there anything I need to adjust? So, you know, artists do that all the time. It's really good to get feedback from others and to check like at different stages instead of waiting to the end and then being like, oh no, there's this thing I should have adjusted, but now it's too late. So here on my goose, you know, the S is like that. If it's out of the water, the chest looks a lot bigger. So if it's in the water, you're obviously not seeing the whole bird because it's going to continue, you know, underneath. But if it's out of the water, it's going to look more like an egg shape. So if it's standing or something, sometimes it's easier to draw like the body first and then, you know, add on. But if it's in the water, I usually tend to start with the head. It kind of is up to you, sort of depends on your picture. If you're doing a bird that is flying, most of the time it's easier to do like the body. Obviously, I'm not even looking at a photo right now. I'm just doing this from memory. Like the body and then the neck, a lot of times will come out sort of like a bowling pin shape. And then do the wings, you know, however they go. So sometimes I'll go like that, just sort of get like the rough shape. And then I'll come back and look at the photo and add on, you know, the feathers once I can see how they're organized. If you're having trouble seeing how it's organized, please let me look at it with you and I'll help you out. Because guys, I've been doing this for a long time. So I can help you know how to look at it. If you're doing a wood duck, raise your hand if you have a wood duck. I know at least a couple people. Okay, pay attention to the beak. They have a little like tooth at the end of their beak, and their heads are kind of squarish, kind of boxy. And I don't know what this is called. I call it the whoosh off the back. They've got feathers. It's like whoosh, kind of hangs down. Like their heads actually aren't that big, but they have these feathers that hang down on the back. Okay, So just pay attention to the individual shapes. I will look at it with you and then draw light till you know it's right. These are all very sketchy lines. I could go back and erase any of these if I was gonna like make a finished drawing and needed to adjust it. So if you're having trouble pressing lightly, sometimes people do that. It's usually because you're holding your pencil up too close. So if you're in the light stages, hold your pencil back further and it will help you press more lightly and kind of be loose to sketch and get it planned out. My husband didn't know that trick. He talked about how, well, no one ever told me that. I'm like, yeah, that's a super easy trick, but I now know to like tell people that because I just kind of learned it. So I'll mention that to you. Okay, if you're doing a fish, biggest piece of advice is don't try to draw it all in one shape. First, look at the main shape of the body, then go back and add on the fins and the tail. So on this bass, kind of curves, comes down. You know, I'll come back and like refine that more later. But to start off with, just kind of looking at the big shapes. Then I'm going to come back, I'm going to add on the tail. It kind of swoops down a little bit. Okay. Now it's going to be way easier for me to add on my fins. A lot of times for the tail fins, I will turn it like this because I think it's easier to get it to like go kind of like flow in a natural direction. And then pay attention because some fishes' fins are more straight. Some come like in, so you want to look at the actual shape that's there. So first do that, and then eventually, like you'll come back and add the bones. The bones and the fins help them like move them. So I'll just do this super quick. All right, we've got this fin here. We've got this fin here. It's kind of spiky. I would come back and refine that, but first, just sort of like sketching out the big shapes to check my placement, check the proportions. Okay, next tip for a fish. Follow the bottom of the mouth along and then curve it up to make the gills. Get that mouth open real quick. Okay, so if I follow that along, I see there's kind of like the top lip. I don't know, fish don't have lips, but I don't know what else to call it. Follow this along and curves up and oh, look, that points to the eye. So things are connected. It's easier to like see where they go if you see what it's next to. And this comes up here and kind of curves back. And then that goes right over the fin. So then my other fin's gonna come here. So follow along, look what things point to, look what they're connected to, and it will help you get them in the right spot. Then I would come along, if your fish has scales, don't start off drawing the scales, unless like on a bluegill, you know, they've got like that big dark spot, like, that looks funny, I know. By their gills. That's why it's called a bluegill. So if it's something like that, draw it. But if it's just scales all over their body, wait to do that. Trust me, it will save you time. So like when it's time to add color, you would do the background color and then come back and do the scales on top. It's way faster than trying to draw the scales at first and then like color in between them. So working in layers, okay? Larger shapes towards smaller details. Draw light till you know it's right. That way, if I'm like, oh, this fin starts up way too far, I can come back and adjust it and erase very easily without like engraving my paper. If you press super hard, sometimes it doesn't even erase. Or if you do erase it, like that's as much as I can get off of that. Then when you go to color over it, it can like make a groove in your paper and it shows up. So remember to draw light till you know it's right. Think about the composition, draw big to fill the space, and then if you get stuck, you need help, please ask me. This is what I'm here for.